we've been talking about political violence, and I got to be honest with you, one of my concerns is that regardless of the election outcome on November 5th, and, admittedly, it may take a few days for us to get final results, but regardless of which way it goes, we have now real credible reporting that there are preparations for violence, mass political racist violence that are underway on behalf of the right, to the point where you have Republicans who are talking about their concerns about the preparations for political violence that they're seeing in their circles. And you know a lot about what that can look like, representing, as you continue to, the two living survivors of the Greenwood Tulsa massacre, that race massacre that took place in 1921. So as much as I'm mindful of that, I'm also mindful that you've gotten some real push forward with that case. So give us a sense as to your understanding of what's happening in this political moment, what we need to be mindful of in light of those comments from Donald Trump, and then I'd really love to turn to see what is happening with your clients and the work that you're doing to continue to represent their interests.
Yeah, Lurie, on the first issue of political violence, it's very real, and we've seen this time and time again across our history here in America. Just today, Equal Justice Initiative, which is run by my mentor and big brother Brian Stevenson, they talked about a brother that was lynched on October 21st, 1916, up in South Carolina. He was a wealthy landowner, had a large family, and he was publicly shot, hung, stabbed, and burned because he wanted to get paid fairly for some cottonseed oil from a white merchant. And then the state of Georgia, the whites in that area, they voted to expel his entire family and take his land. And the governor at the time said, hey, there's nothing I can do about it. And these people were dispersed throughout the country and lost all their wealth. So this happens time and time and time again. And so I'm very worried about the political violence because it's real. And I'm calling upon, as I continue to do every time we talk and every time I talk, the Attorney General to do more. They need to be stepping out right now, doing more, telling people that you will be prosecuted, you will be arrested. We will not tolerate this. It's the same what you see like Elon Musk going out and literally paying people to register to vote for Trump. How can the Department of Justice stand back and say nothing? We need them so strongly. But we also need to be mindful of ourselves and our communities. Have a plan for your community, have a plan for your family. And it pains me to say that, but as you stated, I'm here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I understand what political violence looks like. And that's what the Tulsa Race Massacre was. It was political violence. Right. It was violence to take land. It was violence to take wealth. It was one of the largest wealth transfers in the history of this country, in addition to being the largest crime scene in the history of this country. And one other thing before we talk about specifically, the news and our work, the Tulsa Race Massacre, Lurie, Trump talked about immunity for police officers. This is so dangerous. First of all, he lies and says that these guys go bankrupt when they get charged. First of all, very few of them get charged. And as you know, I've been doing police accountability and excessive force work for over 20 years. Very few are charged. And when they are charged, they are supported by their union and other organizations that are set up to support police. And even when you get a judgment against an officer, it's very, 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 very rare that they're going to have to pay anything. But what's more dangerous is that he's setting the tone for these officers and this violence. That do what you want to do because I'm going to protect you. And that's the dangerous of Trump's rhetoric. And for any person, particularly any Black person, I saw Le'Veon Bell yesterday had a shirt on that said Trump versus the Tramp. Yeah. Any Black person that will stand up for Trump is a sellout and crazy. Yeah. But particularly when you understand that what that means for our community, when you talk about immunity, when you talk about national stop and frisk, when you're talking about rolling back every progress that we've made since the 60s, 1964 Civil Rights Act, the 1965 Voting Rights Act, 1968 Fair Housing Act, and it goes on and on and on. These are things that they want to roll back. And so I'm hoping everyone that's listening today, this morning, understands the power of your vote, but also the power of your organization, your organizing, educating, and mobilizing, not just voting. Because we organized and voted to get Biden in office, but it took us 3.5 years to push the Biden-Harris administration to finally open up a review of the massacre. Right. So it takes more than voting, but we must start with voting.
I want to talk about that review because that was a huge victory and accomplishment. And I know that it took so much. But I want, if you could, for just a second, I'm seeing some folks who are like, oh, I hate hearing his voice. Get used to it. Okay, get used to it because the man ain't going nowhere unless he has that great meeting in the sky. But when you say have a plan for your community, I'm in Brooklyn or at worst in very black suburbs outside of Brooklyn, right? So I feel like we kind of about it. We gonna be good. But I'm mindful this is a national show, Damario. What does it mean? And I shouldn't be so cocky and so bold to say that just because I'm in a very black area where people know how to hang that thing that we should be safe. But what does it mean when you say have a plan for your community for people who have been living in the blissful ignorance of integration for the past 40, 50, 60 years, who have no personal lived experience with sort of political violence that you are confronting up close and personal? What does it mean to have a plan for your community when it comes to protecting your community from that sort of violence for those who are in communities where they're not surrounded by Brooklyn, right? You ain't got the Bronx. You got you might be one of a handful. You might be exposed in ways that you never really realized because you were so proud to be the only one or the first in that job, that community, that what have you. And now you're realizing you are a sitting duck if these people decide to turn. What could have helped your clients have a plan to navigate this? I mean, they were children to be sure, but what does that even look like? And how sad is it that we don't know what it means to have to prepare for that because we've been so blissfully unaware, some of us, for far too long?
Well, I was just say, one, just talk to your family and your friends about what voting looks, what the day of vote looks like in that week. You know, have a plan about how you're going to stay in contact with one another, maybe where you're going to be together as the days after the vote, because you just want to make sure that you understand that violence is very, very probable in some places. And I live in
Yeah.
Oklahoma, and so I'm not in a Brooklyn, right? I'm in a place that
Right.
is surrounded on all sides with very MAGA Trump type thinking.
Mm.
And so just have that conversation. And what is it that you guys going to make sure you're in contact with one another? Where are you going to be? Do you want to be out at night? I mean, literally, this is it's sad, but it's a reality that we must
Yeah,
confront. Because as you stated,
absolutely.
you know, I was with two women last week who survived the Tulsa Race Massacre, who are 109, 110 years old, and these things happen. And like I told the DOJ when they came down for our first set of meetings last week, I said, what you got to understand is that the massacre itself is not unique because we had massacres of our people all around this country in
That's right.
hundreds of places. What makes Tulsa Race Massacre so unique is one, the size, scope, and scale of it. Two, the fact that we actually have it on video.
Mm.
We have hundreds of pictures. We have hundreds of insurance claims, and we
Mm.
have living survivors. And then number three is the only place, the first place at least, I should say that, the first place in American history that American City was bombed from the sky, and a
Mm.
community was burnt down from the sky by its own planes in the air based upon the government at the time. And so these are the things that has happened. These are the things we're going to continue to push to make sure it does not happen again. It starts with having awareness and having a
Mm.
plan.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that has come out of this, the case that you're working on specifically on the case of Mother Fletcher and Mother Randall, did I get their names correct? I feel like I
Yes,
was a
Mother
little bit. Okay.
Fletcher, Viola Ford Fletcher, 110 years old, and
Whew.
Leslie Benefield Randall, 109 years old. She'll be
Mm.
110 on November 10th. And I will tell you, Lurie, we spent time with both of them last week. They were both in great spirits, great attitudes, looking
Wow.
good, smelling good, and ready to continue to move forward. It is such a pleasure and an honor to represent them, but more than that, to be around them. I feel like when I walk into the room with them, I'm literally in the presence of God.
Mm. Wow. How did, when you got the news that there had been some movement with the Biden Department of Justice, explain to the audience what has happened in this case. The last time you were here, you were encouraging us to demand the Department of Justice open an investigation in this case. We know that the legal routes, the law was lawing. And so we were seeing doors, being closed. We were seeing people come up with these nifty arguments that could only apply to your particular set of clients. So we've been in a state of sort of, I don't want to say angst, but some real
Yeah.
concern about what was happening here. Give us a sense as to what's happened in the case since the last time you paid us a visit.
Yeah, Lurie, you're right. We suffered some devastating losses earlier this year with the Oklahoma Supreme Court rejecting our appeal and rejecting our petition for rehearing. And as we've been pushing for over 3.5 years for the Biden administration to open investigation into the massacre, it's never been never been a criminal investigation into the largest criminal crime scene in United States history. And so we continue to push and push and push. And our sister, Kristen Clark, who's assistant director, assistant attorney general for civil rights, she on September 30th, she announced that they're going to do the first ever review and evaluation of the massacre from the federal level. And we were very excited and happy to hear that and make that announcement. But like I told Christian at the time, thank you so much, but we're going to continue to push for an actual investigation. And what does that mean? A review and an evaluation, for us, what we understand is that they're going to come in, they're going to do some interviews, and they're going to try to review all type of any information they can receive, and they want to write a report by the end of the year. Now we understand that Christian did not say this, but my sense is they want to try to get something done by the end of the year because of the uncertainty of the election. And I understand that. But what we're pushing for, and all of the descendants and even the survivors that we met with last week, we want a real investigation. So I'm still telling your audience, while we are celebrating and happy that the federal government has come in, we have met with them. They are coming back in a couple of weeks. We're pushing them for an actual investigation, meaning having subpoena power, meaning actually opening up investigation and finding out who did what, because we know so little about the massacre. People think because of the last 5 years, we've learned a lot more, but we still know less than 10%. And most of what we need to learn, Lurie, does not come from the Black community. It comes from the white community. They have the records. They know who's on those pictures. They know what was taken. They know who was involved. And so only because we've been shut down, we can't do discovery. It's going to take a federal investigation, and that's what we're still pushing for. So we're asking people to do two things. If you have any information or documents that you would like us to put in front of the DOJ, connect with us at doj@justiceforgreenwood.org. That's doj@justiceforgreenwood.org, doj@justiceforgreenwood.org. And when you send that in, then I want you to go to justiceforgreenwood.org and sign our petition, because we're still pushing the Department of Justice to open an actual investigation. Everyone that we've talked to, all the descendants, say it is important, it is vitally important that, one, we know who these individuals who participated in the massacre, even if they're deceased, and two, those entities like the city of Tulsa, Tulsa Chamber of Commerce, the county, and others who perpetrated the massacre and the continuing conspiracy and harm, they must be held criminally accountable.
This is so significant in light of the fact that it's crazy to me that it took 3.5 years, right? So that to me is a reminder that voting is just one of many, 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 many things that we have to do, because getting Joe Biden into office wasn't sufficient in order to have this investigation launched with some intentionality prior to this sort of last minute effort. But explain to us just one more time, if you could, tease out the distinction between a report and an actual investigation. What might we learn under an investigation the way you are encouraging us to push for it? What might we learn there that we wouldn't necessarily get in a report, which I presume would be based on existing sources and existing information, as opposed to unearthing new information?
Absolutely. Let's start first that the DOJ at this time, they're not seeking to utilize any subpoena power. And so you and I both know, Lurie, as lawyers, that there's one thing to get people to give you information voluntarily, but there's a whole nother thing if the federal government sends you a subpoena and say, I want these documents. I want to speak to this person under oath about what happened here. And so that's first and foremost. Like, if you don't have subpoena power, and again, I don't want to be ungrateful, because we are grateful that this has been open. We are happy.
I mean, that's good. We're grateful, but that ain't it. Like,
it's not it.
I'm glad for my appetizer arriving on time, but I'm waiting on the full meal. Like,
that's right.
We got more food to eat.
That's right. And so just think about that right now, they're only going to speak to people who are willing to speak to them. They're only going to review documents that they have readily access to get. Now, there are some documents, again, that we believe that are out there in the world, because over the years we have found them, that we're asking people, again, if you have something like that, go to doj@justiceforgreenwood.org, send it to us, connect with us. But they have the power. They're the federal government. They should be using subpoena power. They should be using their power to utilize the actual resources of the federal government to analyze these pictures, the hundreds of pictures that we have of the massacre, to identify people and within those pictures. They have that type of technology that they can utilize if they want to. They have the type of technology, the investigative nature, to utilize if they want to find out these entities that are still alive, that are still operating, hold them criminally accountable, make them pay restitution, make them pay a fine for what they did. And what I said last week while the DOJ was in town, it is no different than when the DOJ leads the charge to prosecute those Nazis who committed atrocious, heinous crimes against humanity against those that were in the concentration camps in Europe, right?
That's right.
They will find those people. They don't care if those individuals are 105 years old, living in Buenos Aires, Argentina, Brazil, whatever. If they find them, they're going to hold them accountable, and they're going to hold institutions accountable. And what that says to our Jewish brothers and sisters is your life matters. We're gonna make sure that not only that you know that we believe your life matters, but the world understands that what happened to you is not right. We're asking for the same thing. We don't want anything any different than what they already do. They already do this. And so this is what we want. And so these entities, like the city of Tulsa, which right now today, Lurie, are digging up bodies that were killed during the Tulsa Race Massacre and identifying individuals for the first time in history. So literally, we've identified a victim, a murder victim, Mr. C.L. Daniel, who was a World War I veteran, who was a resident of Georgia, living in Utah, heading back home, and was in Tulsa during the massacre and was murdered and was buried in an unmarked grave where he sat and laid there for 103 years. And now we know who he is. And that's who put him there. Who caused him to be killed? It was the chamber. It was the city. They should be prosecuted.
I gotta be honest with you, Damario. My audience knows I don't stand politicians. Like I'm not a stand for anybody. Like if you do good, I'm gonna praise the good that you did. But if you did bad, we're gonna talk about the bad that you did. And I love Kristen Clark. I think she's an amazing sister. I knew her before she went into the DOJ. I was so glad that she is in that space. But this feels like crumbs to me. Biden administration, and I'm these are my words, not yours, because I know you got to present in a particular way, but I feel like if we can identify Black people who were murdered for the first time in 103 years, and you have access to this capacity, to this power that would allow you to determine who put them in the ground, and we're not going to do it, we're not going to use subpoena power. Pardon my French, what the fuck is that? Like what? Like, that don't make no sense to. I mean, and I'm glad that we're doing a report. But without that investigative power, how is that report going to be anything more than a summation of information we already have access to?
No question about it. That's how we feel. And it's not even as important, Lurie, how you and I may feel, but how the survivors and the descendants of those who suffered the massacre, how they feel. They don't want to have their time wasted. I mean, many of the folks that met last week, they said just that to the individuals from the DOJ that we met with. So again, this is a great lesson as we go into voting in the next 10 or 15 days for your audience and all our people to understand. We vote to get people to do what we need them to do to represent our interests. We vote. Voting is about politics, about who gets what, when, and how. And so that's why we vote for certain people. That's why we're saying vote for Kamala Harris, because we understand we have a better opportunity to get what we want and what we need out of her administration. It does not mean that she's just going to do what we want her to do without us pushing her. But we have to continue to push, and we not just vote, but vote and push, vote and educate, vote and mobilize, vote and organize, so we can continue to get what we want. So we have to call it as it is. We wouldn't have gotten this if Trump was in office. We wouldn't even got this review. We get that.
You might not be able to speak on these airways under Trump.
We wouldn't have gotten that. We wouldn't have gotten that if we didn't have Trump. We wouldn't have had Kristen Clark if Trump was in office. So that's a victory, but it's not enough. So we want to continue to push. We can do two things at once. We can push to defeat Trump and get our sister, our VP Kamala Harris in office, so we can continue to move forward on a trajectory towards actual civil rights and human rights and justice and equity and reparations that we're pushing for. At the same time, understand that voting is not the end all be all. We're going to have to push these people. Listen, in 2021, we met with Vice President Kamala Harris in DC. She sat down with my team and two of the survivors, Uncle Red, who's no longer with us, and Mother Fletcher in DC in May of 2021. In June of 2021, we hosted President Biden here in Tulsa, first sitting president to come to Tulsa to discuss the race massacre at the Greenwood Culture Center, first president to acknowledge that there were planes dropping bombs on Greenwood. That was in June of 2021. But listen, we have been working since March of 2021 to try to get the investigation. Look how much time it took. I had more than a dozen meetings with the DOJ. We sent them over 1,000 pages of documents. We've had a national coalition. We've come on your show many, many times to get to this point. So what I'm saying is the work continues regardless of who is in office. But if we don't have the right people in office, it almost is futile because we know Trump is not going to do it. So wrap it all up. Like you said, you knew Christian, I knew Christian. She's a sister of ours. She believes in justice. She believes in civil rights, but she works in an administration where she has to be pushed, and she has people that's above her. So we got to continue to push. So I'm telling all of you.
Listen to this. I tell you right now, here go a push. Merrick Garland, that's some bullshit. Like, Merrick Garland, you're going to have to do more, bruh. Like, you have been one of the slowest, pambiest Department of Justice Attorney Generals that I have known. The lack of intentionality behind some of these actions seems crazy to me. And this is bullshit. Like, it's great and it's cute and it makes a nice little, a press release. And frankly, let me also be saying, I'm glad we have it because I'm glad they're actually doing something that they have not done before. But y'all got to do more. The Department of Justice has to do more. And Damario, I know we have just a few minutes in this segment, and I think we can keep you for just a few minutes on the other side briefly. But I have a question for you about federal monitors, going back to where we started in this conversation when it comes to protecting those of us who are going to be voting at poll sites that are strategically dangerous. We know that before the 2013 case, Shelby County v. Holder, that we had a particular formula that would determine which jurisdictions would have access to federal monitors to come out for their elections. But we don't have after Shelby County, we don't have Section 5 anymore. The formula coverage for pre-clearance has sort of been obliterated. And so we know the Department of Justice has been a bit more liberal with how they are deploying resources to protect those of us who are going to be at poll sites that are dangerous. But and we just have a minute and a half in this segment, and then we go to commercial break, and I'm hoping we can squeeze you just a few minutes on the other side.
Sure.
But what should we be demanding in addition to demanding a real investigation into what's happened with your clients and to what happened to their family and their friends and that phenomenal, dynamically awful event that you described at the beginning? In addition to pushing for a real investigation there, what should we be seeing on the ground when it comes to the Department of Justice to keep people safe at some of these poll sites where political violence is expected to occur or has reasonably already been, reasonably expected to occur, or we have reason to look at past recent elections to see that in fact did occur, and these folks need to be protected as they're going to cast their vote. And not just on election day. We got way too many places with early voting. Texas, early voting starts today. Way too many places for early voting to not see more of a presence, I think. Or am I missing something here?
Well, listen, I'm not a voting rights attorney, but I have an expansive view on what the federal government, the powers that they can have to protect voting rights. I think the president and Biden-Harris administration should be looking at doing the same type of things that Eisenhower and Kennedy had to do in the 50s and the 60s to make sure these schools would be open and people were safe. If they have to deploy resources to polling sites to make sure that people are safe and people have an opportunity to exercise their blood-stained right to vote, then I think that's something that should be on the table. I believe, again, I'm not a voting rights attorney, but I believe that the federal government has a duty to protect the right to vote and have a duty to make sure that people are safe when they exercise their right to vote, and have a duty to make sure, particularly Black and brown people who have been the most vulnerable to political violence, that we are safe and we feel safe.
You were telling us on the other side, not only about the fact that, we should be expecting federal monitors. There should be monitors out there as a result of the legislation in the 1965 Voting Rights Act that keeps us safe when our votes are threatened with political violence. But I want to just circle back to that story of the gentleman that you mentioned. 103 years later, we now know his name. We now know he was headed home. We now know that he was a veteran from the war, and we know that his mother was looking for him. And you were sharing a little bit during the commercial break about the fact that his mother had been searching for him, and we now know that he was caught up in this massacre in Tulsa. Give us a sense as to what that search for her found, if anything, and what 103 years later is owed to his family.
Yes, it's a very powerful story. Again, his name was C.L. Daniel. He was a resident of Georgia.
Daniel with no S?
No S.
That's my maiden name.
C.L. Oh my God, that's right. C.L. Daniel,
snap.
no S. Oh my God, I didn't realize that. C.L. Daniel, no S. resident of outside of Atlanta, Georgia. Went to World War One. Was in the Army during World War One. Was out in Utah. I think that he was out there working on railroad tracks. Not really sure. I was making his way back home to Georgia, and it was in Tulsa. He was killed. His mother was looking for him. She had somehow, this black woman somehow had gotten a lawyer, a white lawyer, to send a letter to the Department of this Congress, the Veterans Administration Affairs Office, saying, hey, you know, I'm looking for my son. I heard he may have been in Tulsa during the massacre. She called it a riot at the time, of course. And, you know, I would like to collect, if we cannot find him, you know, his benefits, his death benefits, whatever you. And they said, hey, basically, we have no proof that he's dead. We don't know where he is.
Right.
And so we need to, we can't help him. And so now 103 years later, not only do we have living survivors, we actually have an individual that we never knew was a murder victim. And guess what, Lurie? There's thousands of people like that, because we know at the time of the massacre, there's about 11,000 residents of Tulsa. We know about 6,000 to 8,000 of those people were accounted for. So we have about 3,000 to 4,000 people that we do not know what happened to them. We don't know if they are just like C.L. Daniel, if they were killed and dumped into the Arkansas River, thrown into a mass grave, put into one of the incineraries, or did they escape for their lives and went and changed their name and never looked back, because that happened also. So this is another reason why we need the Department of Justice to open a real investigation. Right. And I hope everyone that's listening will go to justiceforgreenwood.org, sign our petition that we're sending the Department of Justice to open a real investigation. That's justiceforgreenwood.org, and then connect with us, because this has to be fully investigated with investigative powers, subpoena power, and really look to trying to find accountability for those who perpetrate this massacre.
Indeed. Now, Damario, I know you have to go. We did, of course, just get a call. This happens all the time. I say the audience, the guest's only gonna be here for a few minutes, and the audience be like, "I'm gonna wait."
I'll take one call.
All right, we go. Joy in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Joy, thank you for calling. You're on the line with Lurie Daniel Favors and attorney Damario Solomon-Simmons. What would you like to say this morning?
Damario, this is Mama Joyce.
Hi, Mama Joyce.
I just want to know. Yeah, I just want to know if you were able to speak to your recent denial letter you received about the getting on the reparations committee, whatever they're calling it, which is a joke anyway, but I won't speak no further.
Thank you, Mama Joyce. Mama Joyce sounds like she's dropping some tea. Attorney, what's going on over there?
No, see, she starts. We have a whole other thing. I'm about to come back on later this week, Lurie.
Always, anytime.
Let's do that. Let's do that. So, Mama Joyce, we'll do that. I'm gonna come back on later this week with Lurie if it allows that, and we can talk about that, because that's gonna spawn a whole other.
From one reparations commissioner to potentially another. I can't wait to have that conversation. Jonah, if you could please work with Sarita and the team, or whomever it is, to get attorney Solomon-Simmons back on. Mama Joyce, thank you for that. She was dropping tea.
We'll talk about that. Before I jump off, I do want to give the name of Anthony P. Crawford. He was the brother that was murdered by a lynch mob in Abbeville, South Carolina, on this day, October 21st, 1916. He was beat, stabbed, shot, and hung because he dared to argue with a white merchant over the price of cottonseed. This is what they mean by make America great again. This is what they mean by giving them immunity to do what they want to do. This is what they mean if they get back into office. So for everyone listening, regardless of how you feel, you must vote to stop Trump. You must vote to put Kamala Harris so we can have an administration that we can actually push and not have to continually be thinking about political violence. That they will continue to push, and we need to get rid of Trump. We need to get him off the national stage. So we need to crush him at the polls. We need to organize, mobilize, educate our people, have a plan. And I'll see y'all later this week, and we'll talk a little bit more about these other things.
Yes, indeed.
Peace.
Appreciate you, attorney Damario Solomon-Simmons. Always, you have an open seat in this space. Really grateful for the work that you're doing. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.